Hi everybody. I can see we're having a little flurry of people joining the session at the moment. So I will start a little bit of an introduction and hopefully that gives everyone a little bit of time to join. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Claire from Colt Pens and very excited to welcome you to our brush lettering workshop hosted by the fabulous modern calligrapher and lettering artist Ily Johnson, otherwise known to many of you I'm sure as Ily Boo Designs. So Ileana, do you want to say a quick hello?
Hi everyone, hello. Nice to see or meet you all. I know I can't see everyone.
So whilst Ileana's just checking on cameras and getting things set up, taking a breath, I've just got a couple of points of housekeeping to cover off. So we think the session will last around 45 minutes to an hour. So please make sure you're in a comfy spot. The session is being recorded and we will make the recording available over the next day or so. So if you do miss something, then don't worry, you will have a chance to catch up and take another look and also share if you want to share it with friends. All cameras and sound are switched off for the duration of the session, apart from mine at the moment and obviously Ileana's. But if you do have any questions, you can use the Q&A function down here to ask a question, and I've just seen, yes, YouTube, I believe we will be sharing on YouTube as well. Thank you for the question. Yes, you can use the Q&A in the chat function, and Christine from Colt Pens and myself will be on hand to answer questions, and where we can, and we're not going to try not to interrupt Ileana too much, we will interject and ask your questions directly. We will also, if time allows, have a bit of a time at the end to catch up and make sure we've covered off all the questions. So hopefully we will be in good shape and we can interject as we go, but have a bit of time at the end. So if there's anything you have a burning desire to ask and you forget during the session, then we can cover that off. So Ileana, if you're ready, I'm going to hand over to you to get started with the workshop.
No problem at all. Fantastic. Okay, can everyone hear me? I just want to make sure that's a yes. Yep. Fantastic. Okay, lovely. Well, thank you all for joining. Thank you all so much for joining. Okay, so most of you probably can see this screen with my pens. I've got quite a range of pens to show you. I've basically picked my favourites, and I'm just going to take you through some of them, take you through some of the papers I tend to use. So the initial thing will be to do a couple of warm-ups, and I'll show you how some of these pens work, how to hold your pen when you're actually doing brush lettering, because I don't know at what stage everyone's at. So it's always good to, you know, test your pens out, figure out what they do, understand what pens do what, because there's such a range as well. But I'm going to take you through, to start with, my ABTs, which are these ones, and I'm hoping some of you have them. They're dual ABT Tombow brush pens, and I've got pretty much every colour going at the moment. So they're dual because they've got two tips. So I'm just going to move the others to one side for a second whilst I show you what they're like. So they've got two tips, a brush pen tip and a mono line tip. I tend to obviously use the brush tip a lot more, and I've got some really nice colours. Now when I'm buying my ABT pens, I tend to buy them like with two shades, close colours. So I tend to go for a lighter shade and a darker in the colours, because I like using the lighter to sort of lay down my lettering, and it particularly helps when I'm doing things like blending. I like to almost create like a bit of a lighter hue for my lettering, and then I can go back into the actual wording, and I use my darker colours, like a range of darker colours. So those are great. These are all water-based, and they're brilliant because obviously, as I mentioned before, you can blend with them, which is great. So you can use them like watercolours basically and apply water to them. So I do this using, and you can use a paintbrush as well. You don't have to have a Tombow water brush, but these are quite cool because they're literally, it's a split barrel. So you unscrew it and you put water into this part of it into this chamber, and then you can just attach it again, and you've got your water brush. Now it comes in a range of different sizes, so you know, again, it depends on what you like, but I don't actually fill this part with water because I find I get too much water flooding out of here, so I just tend to use it like a paintbrush. So as I said, you can use paintbrushes also. Another favorite is, so this is in the ABT range. Sorry, all my pens are totally, because I've used them so much, all scratched up. This is a blender pen. Now, again, it's dual, so you get the monoline tip and you get the brush tip. Now, it looks pinky, and you probably think, well, is it going to be pinky when I use it? It's not. So it does stain a little bit as you go along when you're using your colours, but don't be too worried about that, and I'll show you how that works. So I also, if I don't have water available, I will use my blender pen when it comes to blending this range together. So I'm just going to take you quickly through some others. So this is the Fudenosuke pen. I say Fudenosuke, Fudenosuke, there's so many different ways, I believe, of saying this. You don't have, you know, I've shortened it. I call this range of pens, basically, it comes, you can get a pack of two. So you get a blue one, which is a slightly harder tip, and then you get this black one, which is slightly softer tip. The black is my favorite because I just like the flexibility of the tip a little bit more. But it's a good thing to just test out these two, because, you know, you might be one compared to the other. So I call them Fudu pens. Now, they're great. They're just obviously single tip, much smaller compared to the ABT Tombow range. So, and they're really, really great for beginners. So if you're starting out, you're brand new to brush lettering, I highly, highly recommend getting this pack together. And like I said, you know, I don't like to limit people to like just using one pen. It's great to just, you know, try them out. So you've got that as a range. Then I love this Mono twin pen. It's basically it's like a permanent marker that Tombow do. Again, it's like a mono tip. You don't, you know, it's not like a brush. You don't get any kind of brush lettering ability. But what's really great is if you do a lot of blending watercolor effects, it's really nice to kind of go back in and do some really nice illustration, or even with your lettering. If you don't want the black lines to bleed, this pen is fantastic. It works really well with water. And it's also alcohol based, so bear that in mind. And then some other favorites of mine are the twin tone pens, and I just recently started using these and I absolutely love them. So I've taught in the past a journal workshop with Tombow, and these pens come in really, really handy. They're fantastic. You go a little bit, well, you can get a bit more detail, should I say, because as you can see with this tip, it's tiny. It's like really, really small, and it's lovely for doing journaling and much finer detail work. And it comes, I mean, this range comes in a huge selection of colours. Again, they're dye inks, so you can use them with water. I tend not to. I like doing lots of shadowing details with this, and like I said, more finer details with these styles of pens. So having said that, really quickly, going to take you through papers now. I love using, because it's nice and cheap for me, I just buy really good quality HP photocopy paper, smooth. You want to make sure that you have a lovely smooth paper for your pens, because you don't want to fluff your pens up on really sort of rougher surfaces, and that being like watercolour, some watercolour papers. Now you can get a watercolour paper, which is a hot press smooth watercolour paper, and that's perfect for doing things with your ABT brush pens and any sort of watercolour effects. So like I said, I just buy packs of smooth HP paper. For my blending, I tend to go for things like obviously Bristol board paper and hot smooth watercolor paper. So this is from Tombow. You can get it from a different company. Obviously you don't have to go with Tombow. This is my De La Rowney one, and the paper is a little bit thicker. It's a little bit more absorbent, very, very smooth again. And it's great for doing all the brush lettering work that we're going to be doing in a second, which I'm going to show you. Another good paper to use are the Rhodia Dotty Plain. You can get them in so many different ranges. They're really great. The paper is thinner, so bear that in mind with Rhodia, but it's really smooth and it works fantastically well with brush pens of any kind. So, and it's a little bit more expensive. So I tend to, like I said, just buy cheaper paper, you know, obviously good quality cheaper paper to use on all my practice. And then when I'm doing things that are a little bit more sort of, I want them to be kind of, you know, maybe for a nice project, or I want to give to somebody, or I use to frame, because I do lots of framed quotes. I just do it on a slightly nicer paper like this. So having said that, I'm going to take you through some of my kind of little tips and tricks when you're using, we're going to start with the ABT brush pens, obviously. So if some of you have these, that would be great, get them out. Now I like to do lots of warm-up practice before I start any of my final lettering. So the general rule when you are doing brush pen lettering is to sort of, it's to try and keep your hand at a 45-degree angle. And the only reason being is that you're trying to get as much of that lovely length in the, use as much of the length, should I say, in the tip of the pen. So you're angling your hand. It's a very different way to thinking about cursive writing, where we sort of write quite quickly and we hold the pen probably a little bit straighter. So in this case, you don't want to be doing that. You want to have more considered strokes. So we're just going to be doing a couple of these down strokes. Now my pen is squeaking. I'm sure you can hear that. Totally fine. The pen's not broken. I quite like the squeak, the more the better. So what you're doing is you're just trying to be slow and consistent with your line. And normally when I'm going down on my down strokes, I want those to be nice and thick. I tend to hold my pen at the bottom and then lift off. So try not to create these sorts of wispy lines, because it's all about being considered. Okay, so just bear that in mind. So we're doing down strokes, which are always going to be thicker, and our up strokes are going to be lovely, hopefully, and thin and wispy, as thin as you can get it, obviously. And that obviously as well depends on, you know, the pressure. So when you're doing brush lettering, it's all about gauging, you know, the pressure that you're putting on the paper and through your pen when you're creating these sorts of warm-up strokes. So I tend to do a variation. So the downward and the upward strokes are the basic strokes that form all the other strokes, and will also help you to kind of gauge as well how much pressure. And it's fine if you do this, like I've gone a bit wispy here, don't worry about that. Don't worry about your line obviously being really deathly straight. It's not about having a perfect line. You're more gauging the pressure that you need to apply on the tip of your pen in order to get these sorts of strokes. So just bear that in mind. We don't want any perfectionists right now. We're just practicing. So be good to yourself. Mine wobble, and this happens to me all the time. So when I'm practicing for the first time in the day, before I do something, I have wobbly lines too. So this is why we warm up. Now we're going to take those two strokes and we're going to put them together. So now we're forming other shapes, which are really important for our brush lettering, for making up all our letters. So I'm now going to do upturns and downturns. So I'm taking those two lines and I'm putting them together. So again, upstrokes always lovely, light and thin, and your downstrokes are going to be thicker. So I tend to do a variation of these, go between a downturn and an upturn. So these are the downturns. And if you notice it's getting a bit wobbly and funny and weird, you just slow it down. So just slow it down even more. So you're just taking your time. And even if you come off the paper, it's fine. You're just applying, you're just, like I was saying, you're just trying to gauge how much pressure you need to put. So when you do get new pens, you just, you know, you need to play with them, because these are quite nice and they're quite firm, but some of the brush pens might be way more flexible, and you just need to practice and understand how they work.
Ilana, just a quick question from our attendees. So obviously a lot of the pens are dual pens. You've got the brush and then you've got the fine tip as well. Do they themselves then come in different sort of flexibility gauges, or are they all very consistent?
They're all consistent. So you will get, each of the pens have their own level of flexibility. So this will be this is a much bigger tip, so it will be way more flexible than the Fudu pens. So the Fudu pens they're firmer, and that's why I was initially saying that they're quite good for beginners, because you have a bit more control, and I can show you how these work as well. So you have a little bit more control over the line. So it's I feel there's nothing wrong with getting a pack with, you know, some of the Fudus, some of the ABTs, and trying them out. But if you've never done it before, I would suggest probably sticking to the Fudu pens initially. So as you can see, it's just, I have a lot more control on that line. So that's kind of like the difference. And then with the mono tips, these are very hard, so they're not flexible in any way. And you're just going to get a single line. So as you can see, I'm just doing a single line, and there's no difference between, you know, the brush pen tip. So you're just getting a single line. I'm going to continue with this, and I'll just show you a couple more warm-ups. Another really good one is the oval. So think about it as starting at like either 1 o'clock. So I'm going to do that. So you're coming up, you're coming around, and then you're joining it. Now it doesn't have to be exactly oval shaped in any way. It might be a bit squashed like that one was. That's absolutely fine. You're just again playing with the different pressures, and then I like to reverse that. So I'm thinking of it starting at 11 o'clock, coming around and down. It's like a backward C, and then you're joining it. So you're doing lots of these funny little strokes. They're all a bit weird, and at the moment you're like, well, how am I going to get to all the beautiful lettering? But these are really great to do, because as I said, you're just practicing holding your pen, understanding the pressure you need on the pen, and warming your hand up. You need to make sure your hand is nicely warmed up before you tackle anything. So as you can see, they're all completely differently shaped, and that's fine. So don't worry too much about that. But again, I'm focusing on the shaping. So that one's a bit wispy. And I do like to go, you know, transition between the front reverse and, like I was saying, the upturns, downturns. Another shape is our ascending and descending loops. I'll show you those really quickly. So you're coming up, nice fine line, and then you're coming down. So I just like to make these shapes a little bit bigger, because sometimes people can make them quite tiny and you don't get that nice length. So you're sort of doing that shape, and then you're reversing it by coming down and then pulling up. So you're almost creating like a J shape. Now I'm going very slowly, and I've been doing this for a while, the slower I go, the more wobbly I go. And that's just me, because I'm a bit more of a whippier, faster letterer. So after a while, I start to just go quicker like this. And I just like to do lots and lots and lots of patterns on my paper using my brush pens. So I'll just go a bit faster. So I am showing you things quite slowly, because it's important to do that, obviously, when you're starting out. Okay, so generally, those are the strokes. Now you can use any pen to do them, that's fine. You just kind of have a pattern of, you know, starting off your down, your up strokes, your up turns, your down turns, your ovals, backwards ovals, and then your ascending and descending curves. And you just want to do a couple of pages of those really to warm your hand up.
Another quick question, Ileana. Was that Fudenosuke the soft or hard tip?
So the one that I used earlier was the soft tip. So the soft tip is the black Fudu pen. The hard tip is the blue. It's like a navy blue colour, and you can buy them in a pack together like so. But yeah, so, and it just depends on what you like. I'm not as keen on the harder tip. I find I'm a little bit more kind of jerky with my writing. I quite like the softer tip. It's just my preference, obviously. So what I'm going to do next, because it'd be really lovely for us to practice a word. So I've got a word that I'd like us to all do, if possible. And through, obviously, me showing you how to do this word, I'll show you a couple of techniques that I have. So for instance, as I was mentioning before about getting a lighter shade and a darker shade with my pen colours, I tend to do this because I like to lay down. So I'll just show you on like a letter. So for instance, my A, capital A and lowercase a. So that's done really lightly with my very pale pink. So I've got a 761 pale pink pen, and I like to then go in with a darker colour, which is my red, and I'll just show you really quickly blending the two colours. Now, when you're blending, it's quite good to work just on one letter at a time, because, and this might actually happen with this pen or with these colours, is that they might not blend as well, but there's always a way around it. So I tend to just, when I'm blending, I tend to just work on one letter at a time. And then I'm taking my light colour pink and I'm pulling that colour. I don't know if you can see it, it's starting to blend, pulling that red through and pulling it down. So now it's starting to pick up the colour and blend. And I tend to work in a downward fashion because you can still create a bit of peeling and bubbling on your paper if you scrub too much into the paper. So just bear that in mind. And also the more like you layer your colour, the darker it will become. So again, I'm going to do the lowercase a, and again, it's just me applying where I obviously want that colour to come through. It's applying that colour. Now I'm going to show you with the blender pen this time. So that's this one, how that one works. So it's really quite good because it picks up the colour and almost places it elsewhere. So it kind of soaks it up and it smooths out that line. And if you don't necessarily want, say, more of the pinkier colour, you can just use your blender and it works in a really lovely way. So that's another way of doing it. So I've got a little bit less pink going on down here and it's a little bit lighter on this one. It's probably a little trickier to see. Another great way of blending, I buy these vinyl like A4 bits of paper. Now you can buy a blender pack from Tombow where you get a nice blender pack. You might get like, I think it's brush, a blender brush with a nice kind of blending palette, but I've just bought vinyl and I chop it up, and you can also use the vinyl to apply colours and blend. And I tend to, so you can either pick it up with your blender pen like this, like so, and you can apply it directly onto the paper, and you get this sort of effect coming through. And it's quite nice if you do 2 different colours, so you could mix your red and your purple. I'm probably going to get a really hideous colour now that I've done that. And then you just pick that colour up and pull it through into your next one. I tend not to use the blender as much in this way. It's going to give me a hideous brown or something. But it's a really nice way if you want to go back into your lettering to pick colour up and place it into the spaces. So, you know, I might go back in with my red and then just start applying that, and then slowly kind of blend and mix it back in. And it's actually quite effective because you can get much nicer blending. It just takes a little bit longer, but you can apply it in that sort of way. Okay, and also, so right now, as you can see, I've got loads of ink on here. I'm just going to take a piece of paper, and you just want to scrub it out. And as you can see, it's starting to come out. It doesn't stay on the pen. Even though the pen looks like it's really stained, it won't stay there forever. So already, you just want to kind of turn it around, make sure you get everything. It's pretty much gone. So I just tend to do that after every session that I've had using my blender pen before I put it back. And it looks like it's stained, but it's totally fine. So just a good tip. Okay, so I will also show you very quickly. So another, like I was saying about my lighter pen colours. So I've got a light grey here. I'm just going to do another version. So like A, and then I'm going to just quickly get my green. Where is it? Right there. I'm going to use a bit of that green on here, like so. And what I tend to do sometimes is, yeah, I'll use my brush. So again, I'm just putting a little bit of water onto the tip of that, and you can kind of see it sort of comes alive a little bit more, like so. So I tend to, I like mixing in some of the colours into each other, obviously. So I'm going to take something like my darker purple right now, like so. And then I'm going to pull in that blue into the purple. And what's really nice about this, when you use water, it blends it beautifully. Now you don't want to use too much water, because sometimes what I was saying before about like doing each letter at a time, you don't want it to dry too much because you might get a little bit of a line, a very obvious line. So you just want to try and even that out. So that's all I'm doing here. Now, it's always good not to put too much water on because you will get bleeding along that line. So just bear that in mind. That's why I only kind of use my brushes. Like as I said, I dip it into the water rather than using like filling the barrel, because I can control the amount of water I'm applying. So I just pick that back up, and it's really great. I mean, you can create any kind of beautiful effect, and I love this way of blending more so than any other way because it's just more even, and you can then really use your brush as a paintbrush and you get to just be a little bit more accurate. And right now I've got like this big line here. That's absolutely fine. All I do is I go back in with a little bit more purple and I pick that up with my brush, and then I pull that colour in and it just evens it out. So it's great. So there are lots of different ways of basically applying your pens, your ABT pens, and getting these beautiful colours to blend together. So there's tons of different processes, but I've just showed you a couple, so hopefully you can have some fun with that. Now I'm going to show you very quickly how the Fudu pens work, because I'll just show you the differences in terms of, I was saying before, obviously we've got 2 in a pack, we've got the harder versus the softer. So as I was saying before, these are really great. You've got a lot more control. You can do finer lettering as well. Now this is the harder tip, and it's lovely. I really do like it. It's very fine, but as I was saying before, it's not my absolute favourite. I have better control with the black, softer tip Fudu pen. So I think mine are kind of drying out, which is probably not very good, but I actually quite like, there's something quite nice about the effect that you get with the Fudu. You get this lovely sort of irregular brush stroke, and I quite like that. But as you can tell, there's not much difference, to be honest. It's just about feel and what you like to use when you're writing for yourself. So that's why I say, you know, don't limit yourself to just using one. Try them both and see which obviously is your favourite. But you can do a lot more in terms of, so we're going to do a happy birthday, but I'll write happy birthday in these pens, and then we'll do an ABT happy birthday as well. So I get a bit more control, and I also can write, I like using these pens when I do like birthday cards or invitations, because I have a bit more control over where they go. As you can see, these are beautiful for doing lovely signs or really nice quotes that you want to frame, because obviously it's a much bigger, they're much bigger tips, so you get bigger lettering. But with these ones, you can do much finer sorts of lettering, so that's really nice as well. So I tend to use them in that way, and I always use these pens when I'm doing like birthday cards or celebration type style cards or invitations or something like that. So they're great, and they're sort of semi-permanent. They're not waterproof, so just be careful if you go back in and you want to do something like a watercolor effect on the top. They're not fully waterproof. But the one that is waterproof, which I was mentioning before, which is the Mono twin, so this one, again, dual. Now you need thicker paper for this because it's alcohol based and it is like a permanent marker. You can always tell because it smells a little bit stronger than the other pens. So you do want to make sure you use a thicker, like the Bristol board, definitely for this, because otherwise it will go through. Now I'm just going to do something like a faux calligraphy style, and I'll show you a bit more faux calligraphy. So we'll go back to our A. Now, when it comes to faux calligraphy, we're looking back at where are our lovely thick and thin lines appearing. So what we want to do is consider where the thickest line is sitting on our letter. And it's always going to be on the downstrokes. So I'm just going to fill those in. So I've done that. So that's a faux calligraphy style. And now what I can do is go back in with my water brush. So I'm just going to pick up some of that blue that I put down earlier and go back in to that. I'm just going to pull in some of the other colours. So what's really great about that pen is that it doesn't bleed. So you can do some really nice effects. And using this pen, sometimes I might even do a couple of like florally sort of patterns and pull in different colours. I'm going to have to let this dry now, but you kind of get the general gist of it. And then once that's dry, a little bit drier, I can always go in and do some extra effects. Now you get this really fine tip. This is super fine, this tip, so you can do some really nice detailed work with it. I tend to use the thicker tip a little bit more, but as you can see, I'm just going in. It's not actually fully dry, but it's not bleeding, so it's really nice in that sense. Like if you've actually done a bit of floral work, or you've done a couple of illustrations, and then you just think, oh, actually I really want to go in and put a bit of colour to that, and then you just apply over the top, and it's brilliant because it doesn't bleed. So it's a sort of a must in my kind of toolkit. So we've got that. And then lastly, before we do our happy birthday lettering, we have our twin tone pens. Now I use these, as I was mentioning before, for mainly doing faux calligraphy styles and journaling, because they're so nice in the sense of you get so many beautiful colours, and like I said, you can get some lovely detail because the tips of these pens are really quite tiny on the other side, so this end. And sometimes what I like to do with the much finer tip is I'll create like drop shadow effects down the sides of my lettering in like contrast colours. So I like to do a lot of that, and that just makes your lettering pop even more. It just brings it to life. So I'm just drawing in these lovely drop shadow lines, and I love like adding additional details. So that's really effective to my letters. And as I mentioned before, just again, applying faux calligraphy. So faux calligraphy is just a way of, it's like a cheater's way of doing calligraphy really. And then what you're doing is you're kind of going in and then you're colouring in, if you want to, in any way that you want to, the section that you've just added that additional line to. I tend to not like to fill mine in. I really like the effect that you get when it's just basically like not filled in, so you get that lovely linear effect, but it's just completely up to you, and you know, you can get some really nice styles with that. So that's another nice way of using these pens. And again, because these tips are so tiny, you can do some really detailed, very, very fine lettering with these. So tiny tips. And they're really nice actually to write with as well. So like I said, with my journals, I tend to just, you know, do tiny little headings. I might fill that in. I do like filling my letters in quite a lot. So again, you can get really creative with this and just have a real play with these pens because they're quite versatile. So I'm just adding that in, so you get some really tiny, can create some really nice tiny letters. So we are going to attempt.
Just a quick question before you
absolutely
move on to the happy birthday. We've had a question about, are there any brush pens that are refillable? I think I probably can anticipate that the answer is no.
No, they're not, I'm afraid. You can get refillable. There are some Indian ink Japanese brush pens that you can get. They're very flexible though. They're not from the Tombow range, but they're more artistic, and you probably not enjoy writing with them every day. They create lovely effects on the paper, like I was saying about the Fudu pens, how you get this sort of like slightly more organic brushed effect with the pen, but there aren't, unfortunately. Yeah,
there's a range of colours anyway in the brush pen range, isn't there?
Huge range of colours. These come in the brush pen range, the ABTs come in a huge range of colours, so you're not stuck for that. And with the Fudu pens, So you'll get obviously the blacks and the various you know, softer, harder tip, and you can get them in colours as well. So you can get a range of colours as a pack to buy. So that's quite nice, and have a bit of a play with that. It's more kind of primary colours in that range. Whereas the twin tones, you get a huge sort of variation of shades running through the collection. So you know, lovely soft pinks to blues to pastel, and they're very kind of pastel based as well, but you can get some really nice punchy colours as well. Okay, so hopefully I've showed you how most of these pens work. So I'm going to kind of show you how I tackle my, like, you know, a piece of work. So my lettering, and what we can do is a little bit of, the colours might not completely go, but I'm going to just show you how to blend some of them together. Now, sometimes if you don't have, obviously, like 2 shades like this, as I've been showing you before, really useful to have in your toolbox with these pens is a light coloured or a light shade of grey. And I tend to use grey, really light grey pens a lot when I'm doing my lettering. So sometimes it just, like I was saying, it helps to almost provide this guide. And I know it's easier for me because I'm better at doing freestyling. And when you are thinking about doing something, so we're going to have obviously our happy birthday, I tend to write it up here and think about, you know, how I want it to look. So I've just written it in capital letters here. Sometimes I might just, I mean, I know we're doing this on Bristol board, but if I was doing this on my, you know, on a plain piece of paper or my cheaper paper, I just do a couple of layouts just to see what I like, so what style I like. So I might do more of a calligraphy flourish style for this, and do more of a blockier style for my birthday, or I might go very flourished and do my, you know, very flourished happy, and then do a very flourished birthday. So, you know, and do something quite fancy with my Y's or whatnot. So it's really good to just do a couple of like rough drafts of the layout and get a feel for where you want your lettering to be positioned on the paper. Now, it's easier for me obviously because I've done this for a while to freestyle, but sometimes you know, you might need guides. As I was saying, the Rhodia paper is really good because I was saying it was thinner. You can put guide sheets underneath that paper, so you've got something to be able to help guide you as you letter. So that's just one thing to bear in mind with that paper. So for me, I'm going to write up my happy. So I tend to position, I like to leave my crossbars till later. And as I was saying, you know, whenever you're thinking of your lettering, your downstrokes are always nice and thick, your upstrokes are thin. Now, I'm a bit more of a whippier letterer. So I've got my happy, and now I'm going back to do my crossbar. I just like to leave that till the last because I like playing with the length of my crossbar and seeing what I actually want and what kind of feel I want. So now I'm going to go in for my birthday. I'm going to do more of a blockier birthday. So I'm going to start here like so. And when I'm doing this, I'm constantly sort of looking at where I'm positioning things. Now this is going to come over slightly on my Y, but it's okay. And as you can see, I've gone a little bit wrong here. Okay, so, you know, I maybe could have shunted that up a little bit. I'm so used to sort of writing my, and that's the thing you need to experiment with. I'm so used to doing a very flourished birthday that I know exactly where it sits on the paper, but I've gone for more of a blocky one, which is fine. So, okay, you know, I might just do it again, but that's fine. I'm showing you how I kind of go through my process. So we'll leave it for the moment. Now I'm going to go back in. So I want to create some shading, and I'm going to start with my red, and I'm going to obviously use the two colours that I had shown you before. So now I've got like almost like my traceable template that I've created for myself, really. So I'm going to go into that. Now this is where it's a little bit more of a tedious process, but it's incredibly relaxing, and I love doing this. I love blending because it just focuses me like so much, and I just enjoy the detail that comes with it. So as you can see, I'm just pulling, and like I said before, pull down, because you want to preserve the tip of your pens as well as the paper. And what's really good when you're lettering, you can afford to leave so these can stay without their caps on, these ABTs, for about 24 hours before drying out. So when I do my practice, I take all my caps off, I just attach them to the bottoms, and I will use them as, and it's so much easier to kind of interchangeably use your pen colors, so you can keep the caps off, which is not a problem. So I'm just going to go into that, and as I said, I just do letter by letter and then pull that lovely pink down. And if you find, oh yeah, sure, absolutely.
And how many times is it advisable to go over the same bit of paper without it sort of disintegrating? Or?
Well, it's really difficult. There's not like any hard and fast rules. What it is you start to gauge it. So as you start colouring on the paper, and this is something that you'll kind of learn, what you want to do is not to sit in one place for too long. So for instance, you don't want to sit in that tiny area where you see those two colours where they had merged. You want to try and create a bit more length, and even if you feel that they're not blending as well as you want to, what I will do is I go back in with my water brush, and I'll just take the water brush or my blender brush. So I'm just let me just wash that out a little bit because it's got a bit of blue on it at the moment. And then I'll just add a little bit of water to it, like so. And if I think, oh, I don't like that because the line's not completely blended, I will pull that colour through just a little bit. I think I'm getting a bit of my blue coming through, and not too hard, very lightly, and you just want to pull it down. So again, you don't want to rest too much in that one little area, otherwise you will get a little bit of the paper will lift, and it will naturally do that anyway. There's no complete way around that. If you use the hot smooth watercolor paper, you're going to get a little bit less of that, just because it's sort of built for more it's more absorbent, and it's built for watercolor. With the Bristol board, you will get a little bit more of the paper bubbling up if you sit too much. So right now I'm right here on this, I'm going to pull down, so I'm dragging that colour down and pulling, and I don't want to, as you can see, I haven't kind of scrubbed into that area, so I'm just pulling that colour down. And again, if I'm like, okay, it's not blended perfectly, that's fine, I'm going to go back to it. So I'm just going to keep going along and filling in that space where I want that portion of the darker colour to sit, and I'm just going to go in and bring in my lighter colour. It's also very forgiving, so don't worry too much about being absolutely exact and perfect. I need to go into this bit now, because as I mentioned with your water brush, so I've got a bit of that on the brush tip, a bit of the water, I'm just pulling that through. and it's evening it up really nicely. And I'm not doing it too much, but that's all. It will be something that you will gauge as you go along. And it also does depend on the pressure, because everyone's pressure is slightly different to another person's. So what we're doing is just literally going along, doing exactly the same thing, just working on each part of your letter. And sometimes if you want, you can, you know, you might not want to fill part of it in, so that little loop that comes round is a bit lighter, whereas I've done it a bit darker. So you can have some fun with the lettering and just go light. Try to just kind of blend your colours together quite lightly. So that's all I'm doing at this stage. I'm just creating that nice little effect. And you know, also if you wanted to, you can bring in a third colour, so you can have different variations. I've got something on the wall behind me, and I'll show that to you in a second, because that's also, I do blending workshops with Tombow, and this is the sort of thing that we focus on, but I show a lot more with the water brush and how to blend your colours. So for that one, and you can see how lovely it is. So you've got this lovely gradient line coming through, and you'll have even more if you've got lovely cut, you know, more variation in your colour. And then right here again, I just feel like it needs to be blended a little bit more. So I'm going to now go into my crossbar, and I'm going to keep that nice and dark. I want like a nice dark red line for that. So I'm going to pull that through. And there we have our happy. So I hope most of you are getting on okay with that. Now I'm just going to use, so I'm going to go to these two colours. Now it's really good to show you with a really dark colour. This is very dark, this purple. This is a 606 purple. Now they don't put the names on these, so I have to sort of, I've printed out the Tombow colour wheel, because otherwise I get completely confused with what colour's what. And I just have that sat up on my desk. So I'm using that lovely dark purple, and I'm bringing my light shade and pulling that through, and then creating, just as we did with the reds, following that line, that really similar effect. Now I find when it comes to these really dark, punchier shades, that they don't always blend like really amazingly perfectly well. I think if you catch it, you're fine, but sometimes they just don't, and that's okay. And it's no biggie, because I think when you look at it probably on camera, you're probably like, it's fine. But again, I'll go back in, or I'll use my blender, which is the white tip. And what the blender does is it kind of picks up colour, as I was mentioning before, and it positions it in a different place. And I'll just sort of, sometimes I'll just dab it if I'm a bit worried about sort of scuffing up the paper too much. I'll just sort of dab it at that point, and it tends to take care of that line quite nicely. So we'll just continue basically going along your word for birthday and doing exactly the same thing. And sometimes what I do is I don't get too perfectionistic about it, you know, right at that point. I think, okay, I need to go back, that's absolutely fine. What I tend to do is fill in all the colour where I want it, and then I go back in with either my blender or my water brush. So I'm going to try and do this quite quickly. I know we're probably running out of time, but I wanted to just show you very quickly how I do a couple of shadowing details around the letter. So I'm going to speed this up a little bit, but obviously take your time. And it's kind of, you need to have me on fast forward, I think. It's a very therapeutic part of brush lettering, I must say, doing the blending. Some people might absolutely hate it because it's just like, oh no, God, I just want to get on with it, to be honest. And that's absolutely fine. You do not have to do this. It's just one of many things that you can do with the Tombows, but I think it's so effective and it's really gorgeous, and you can create some beautiful effects within your artwork, you know, depending on what you use it for. And even sometimes in my own journals, I love doing this style of lettering because it's quite good fun, just for like headings and things like that. So we're just going to finish that off. So if I had more time, I would blend it a little bit more into each other, but I'm just going to leave it like so. Don't think it looks too bad. And then what I tend to do, like I was saying with like the greys and the different kind of, you can get so many different shades of grey. There's so many different shades. I like having, I've got like a whole range of the grey ABTs, and I use that for a lot of my shadowing. So as I was mentioning about drop shadows, I tend to do that around a lot of my letters, because again, this just creates a bit more life and pulls it all together. You don't have to be too exact. Like, what's really nice about the light grey is that if you go a little bit wrong, it doesn't really show up too much. So that's always a good thing. But you're just giving your lettering just enough of a different look. And then again, you can always go in with either the mono twin, so that was the more permanent marker, and I like to have a secondary line that goes down my letters just to create a little bit more detail. I really love doing that. So you've got a little bit of that coming through. So it just sits on top of the grey and it gives just another nice look, just to finish it off.
Question here, is there a rule to the shadowing? For example, is it always underneath and to the right? Does that work best?
So you can do it on either side. So you can, if you want to, it's a good rule to always stick to one side. So if you start it on the right, keep it to the right. If you do it on the left, that's absolutely fine to do as well. Because basically, drop shadows are all about where the light's coming from. So imagine having, you know, a lamp or the sun on one side of you, where are the shadows going to be falling? So you just want to kind of keep to that rule of like, if I start on the right, keep to the right. If I start on the left, keep to the left. But there's no absolute rule about it being on the right hand side. It's just what your preference is for your lettering piece, basically. So I'm just going around, and you sort of want to kind of dot it around. You don't want to draw this, especially the dark line, you don't want to draw it all the way around your letter, otherwise you're just creating a big old kind of, you know, outline. And then just around these bits, like so. And then again, I just like taking that and doing a really similar thing. Now sometimes what may happen is as you go along, because these are water brush pens, water-based pens, you sometimes can pick up a little bit of the colour from before onto the tip of that. So I just tend to scrub it out a little bit, and I always keep my spare paper around quite close to me, and then just create my little drop shadows on my letters. So I'm going quite quickly here just because of time, but it just lifts the lettering a bit more, as you can see. And then again, you know, you can choose what you may want to do around the border of it. So you might want to choose a different colour, sometimes a different pen, like something like so. You can use a really, really fine tip. I'm not sure how these two colours are going to actually work together. I should have probably chosen like a red, but let's try it. Now, you want to try and ensure that when you're using the the twin tones, which are these finer ones, just let your lettering dry a little bit more, because as I said before, most of Tombow's pens are used water base, or they have a dye of a water base type dye within them. That's why the only one which I just used earlier that doesn't bleed through is going to be the Mono Twin. So just let your lettering dry a bit before you use these, because they can bleed a little bit. So again, we're just using that to create more definition around your lettering. So again, it's just about playing, it's picking up the pens, it's having a kind of like a nice selection of pens to use, and then just experimenting a little bit with it and having fun and really seeing what each can do, and, you know, just trying the different styles of lettering out with the different types of pens. So generally that's what you're aiming for. And I'll show you really quickly if I can get it off the wall without tearing the wallpaper paint off, because I did that the other day. I've done all of this using my water brush. So I've really been able to, it has a lovely, more of a lovely watercolour effect going through the lettering. And I mean, as you can see, there are areas that have like bled just a tiny bit, and it's just because I've added a bit too much water. But again, I've just created these lovely drop shadows around the lettering, and it's really helped it to just lift off the paper. So there are lots of really lovely things that you can do with this range of pens. I hope that's explained it all. I mean, if you have anything that you would like me to go over again or show you, just do say, because I have said a lot.
Ileana, that was fantastic. Thank you.
Great.
That was amazing. I'm totally in awe of your lettering skills. Mine does not look like that, but practice will make perfect, I'm sure. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us. We'll see if there's some more questions that come up in the last couple of minutes. But yeah, your guidance on how to get the best out of the Tombow range is great. I loved the blending and the ombre effect that creates, but the impact of the drop shadowing with the light grey actually is really simple. I feel as a beginner and I'm feeling a bit daunted by it all. I feel like that's something I could have a go. It has such an amazing effect. There is one question that came through, which was actually on the tip of my lips earlier when we came online, but someone's asked, as a complete aside, what's the colour of your nail varnish? Because your nails look beautiful.
Oh, I love you. Thank you so much. I can't remember this one. It was oh my goodness, that's terrible, isn't it? I've got it somewhere and I don't pay much attention. It's like a sort of a burnt terracotta colour.
Perhaps you'd like to wave your nails, give everyone a little nail. Yeah, look at those, they are beautiful.
I do go for, I love teals, so I've been wearing teal for the longest while, like really dark teals, but this is sort of a, yeah, and I can't remember the colour name. That's terrible, isn't it? I should have...
You've inspired, so I think someone's going to go off on a search now for the colour. It's fantastic.
That's amazing.
Thank you so much. So I'm just going to do a little cheeky shout out, because if you haven't got Tombows already, or you've got some and you just want to pop up, at the moment we've got a 3 for 2 on Tombow, and as a little thank you to all of you for joining the session, there's 10% off until Friday as well when you use the code Tombow10, so you can get a little bit extra off that if you want to. If you want to give them a try and you haven't already, and Ileana's inspired you, or you just want to top your range up, it's there. And we will share the code. That will go out, I think, on email tomorrow. Christine will give me a shout out if I get that wrong. If you would like to share any of your brush lettering with us, we would love to see it. It's Cult Pen's 16th birthday as a business. We're 16 next month in May. So if you have got some happy birthdays that you want to share, that would be even better. But any of your brush lettering as part of the workshop would be fantastic. Thank you, Christine. She just shared the code in chat if anyone needs it. Yeah, so please share. And if you use the hashtag CultPensCreative, and then we'll share as much of the artwork as we can. So we love doing that and seeing what everyone's creating. So it's fantastic. And if you're not already following Ileana, then you can do on Instagram at Ily Boo Designs. So yeah, please do that too. As I mentioned, the session's it has been recorded, so we'll share that with you in the next couple of days and on our social channels. And thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very, very much, Ileana. It's brilliant.
No problem.
See you all soon. Thanks, everybody.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Take care. Bye, everyone.